Turtles in Time is one of my favorite games of all time. We go way back to the point that this could be considered my first favorite. As a kid, I was a Ninja Turtles fan, but more so in the way a toddler is into dangling keys. The more colorful and vibrant, the more my attention was drawn in, and nothing drew me in more than the video games by Konami. A long time ago, a Pizza Hut down the street from my home had a little corner with some arcade machines, and there she was, Turtles in Time. That cabinet art was forever seared into my tiny, mushy, developing brain. I've read critiques that the artwork is too goofy, others saying it's unsettling. It definitely has this uncanny valley look to it, especially when compared to the previous game's art, like they just whipped it up together in a weekend with some cheap costumes. To me, it was iconic, and visiting that Pizza Hut was something I remember looking forward to constantly, although to be fair, I'm probably remembering it differently than it actually played out. Like I only went once, and to my 5-year-old brain, the time between visits was an eternity. The irony there is, time really would slow down. One day we went back to that Pizza Hut, and I was so excited to see my beloved Turtles. I had brought a copy of Nintendo Power, which featured a piece on the Super Nintendo version of the game, which was silly considering that the arcade and Super Nintendo versions are very different. That, and I couldn't even read. But it didn't matter, I was just so excited to play some more Turtles in Time. Except, there was no Turtles in Time. I had turned the corner, and instead of seeing those goofy-ass grimaces, the Simpsons arcade game stood where I expected to see the Turtles. I remember that sinking feeling in my stomach as I glanced left and right, not understanding what was happening. Little did I know this would be the last time I would see Turtles in Time for a very long time. For those too young to remember, in the early 2000s, arcades weren't necessarily dead, but they weren't thriving either. I remember thinking back then that arcades were dead, but now in 2025 I realize I took them for granted. There were still plenty of spots like Tilt Arcades at the mall and at family restaurants like Fuddruckers, and every time I went to one of these locations, I kept an eye out for Turtles in Time. But nothing. The days turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years, years into decades. Every arcade I went to, I just wanted to see Turtles in Time, but nothing. I found the first Ninja Turtles plenty of times. I ran into the Simpsons way more times than I could count. It didn't matter if there were a couple machines or a whole floor dedicated to them, I could not find a Turtles in Time machine. And of course, with each passing year, as arcades kept disappearing, the odds of running into one lowered and lowered. But I never gave up hope. I always kept that eye out.
We're gonna go hunt for that. Carlos is looking forward to, Turtles in Time?
Never seen one.
The closest I ever came to finding a machine was with the Heroes of Fandom in Los Angeles at a barcade. I even took a step back in shock. I couldn't believe it. But unfortunately, it was a TMNT machine that was housing a Turtles in Time. At the time, I felt some relief, but I still wanted to see the art. At this point, I was into my mid-20s, almost 2 decades had passed searching. But in 2021, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and I took a road trip to Yosemite, and on the way up decided to stop at an arcade called Oh Wow Nickel Arcade, a retro kind of arcade like Chuck E. Cheese. And around the corner, there it was.
Like from my childhood, like Pizza Hut, and another nickel place from a long. I'm like, it's stupid, but like I've spent so many years like waiting for this moment, and here it is, it's finally like.
My search was finally over. It only took me 2.5 decades to finally find a Turtles in Time arcade machine. It's so silly, there are so many things that are more worth getting emotional over than some silly video game. But what made that moment so special for me was just how long it took. You'd think with a franchise as popular as the Ninja Turtles and a game that is widely considered by many to be their best beat-em-up ever, you'd think it wouldn't have taken as long as it did. My wife and I beat the game with the last of our nickels 1 hour before closing. I made sure to soak in the moment, took my photos and videos, and as we were leaving, I took one last look at the machine, acknowledging that it could easily take another 2 decades until I run into one again in the wild. And as we rode off to our final destination and the sun was setting, I looked over to my now wife and I said, I'm glad I got to experience this moment with you.